Welcome into the latest edition of the Bombers Beat podcast. I am your host, Jaime Eisner. We're going to talk about our first two-part series discussing the MLB Trade Deadline and specifically what the Yankees need to be looking at both from a hitting and a pitching perspective. And first off, I want to say apologies for missing the All-Star Game post-recap. I was a little under the weather. Despite the fact that the game went forever and we had, half the players left the ballpark apparently before the extra inning swing off for the home run. Just all the stuff that happened. But I was going to give you a little bit of a recap, and obviously, that did not happen. But what is going to happen here is taking a look at some guys that the Yankees might need to potentially look at here. As we've talked about, the Yankees are basically on a 90-win pace right now. They're currently sitting in a wild card spot in the American League, but there's only, a couple games between them in first place, only a couple games between them and missing the playoffs. So they're right in the thick of things, and unfortunately it looked like they were going to be, a lot better than that, but they had that June swoon and then a little bit of struggles at parts of July, and they've put themselves back in this equation. But the Yankees should be aggressive, and I think that's if you're Yankees fans, I think what's really exciting on that front is that it is fun to always be in the mix, for just great players at the deadline. And I know, there's a lot of pitfalls that can come with being active at the deadline. I think you start to look at, some of the deals that were made in the past. And I think one of them that was probably front and center here this week, just because of both players being heavily involved in the All-Star game, was the Javier Baez for Pete Crow-Armstrong trade. Obviously not knowing at the time, although he was considered a really good prospect at the time, I don't think the Mets knew that Pete Crow-Armstrong would turn into this. They get a rental in Javi Baez, and obviously that experiment in general, I should say, it just didn't work out. I know Javier Baez was having a bounce back year this year, but that's several years later. So there's always the pitfalls that come with, the risks, I should say, of trading prospects, particularly well-regarded prospects, for those that are going to really just help you for a short period of time. But there's also the sense of being just flat out, and I'll say this a lot in any sport, if you win the championship, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, if you add the pieces you need, let's say hypothetically, and the Yankees win the World Series, I don't really care what you gave up. Now, you can't make that, I'm going to trade this and win a World Series. You can't do that in July. Like, that's not how the world works. You could do that in retrospect. We can look back in October, November, December and say, oh, well, they traded X, Y, and Z to win a championship, so it was all worth it. But right now, obviously, it carries the tremendous amount of risk. So what we're going to look at here is the pitchers the Yankees might go after. And I think there's two sets of pitchers, is whether or not they're going to grab a starter or not, which I think they're going to try, but I'm a little bit less optimistic that they're going to grab a starter than I would say either a reliever or that third baseman. But we'll talk about the hitting options on Friday's show. But the starter that's been linked with them the most lately is Zac Gallen. And, and I think that's kind of been tied a little bit to the Yankees also being heavily interested in Eugenio Suarez, who is, by the way, is fine coming out of the All-Star game. He did get hit, but he's fine. I think because when you have, in a case where you have a team and you're able to get multiple pieces and maybe you're looking at both arms, Zac Gallen's an interesting case because this is somebody that was really a really good pitcher throughout his entire career. And then I think you look at last year was definitely a little bit of a step back. His numbers were still good, but they weren't great. And I say that to say that, like, he was fine. Like, I mean, you deal with the 3.65 ERA, but his WHIP, was 1.26. He just didn't really look like himself as much last year because I think the walk rate went back up. Because it's really interesting because you look at the kind of tails of his runs here. And a little bit earlier in his career, he was a guy that would walk a few too many guys. Like you would see him, especially early in his career, you're seeing like walk rates of 4.5 per nine, 3.7 per nine, 3.6 per nine. But then those last 2 years in 2022 and 2023, last 2 years in Arizona before last season, obviously, because we're talking about that as the cutoff point, he really did a good job. You look at 2022, he led the league in whip and hits per 9 innings. He dropped his walk per 9 rate down to 2.3. Finished top 5 in Cy Young that year. Followed that up again in 2023, his only All-Star year. Even though he allowed more hits, he still kept his walk rate really low, dropped it to a career low 2.0, and finished third in the Cy Young voting and even got an MVP vote. So you really looked at somebody that had a little stretch there, particularly from the pandemic season 2020 through 2023. His first 4 full years in Arizona. Obviously, he spent 2019 between both the Marlins and the Diamondbacks. But you look at that stretch, he had 4 years of 3 top 10 Cy Young finishes. And then last year, it kind of looked like a little bit of a regression, looked a little bit more like his 2021 year. Which has really been his only quote-unquote before this season, really his only bad season. And that was the 2021 year where he had a 4.3 ERA. He had a whip near 1.3. But then he immediately bounced back with what we talked about these last couple years. But he kind of showed some signs. And he wasn't quite as dominant as he had been. And, you looked at his overall numbers and they still were pretty solid. I think his fastball wasn't as good, but he really overall still was putting up pretty good numbers overall. He had plenty of run in his off speed and his breaking pitches. He looked solid, but it just didn't quite look like it used to. And I think you look at deep into his metrics, and he's always been a guy that people have been able to hit hard off of, but he was able to kind of limit how often that would happen. This year he's been a mess. There's really been nothing that's been above average about his game so far this year. I think if you look at it, his whiff rate is now slightly above average, but I mean, that's really it. Everything else is either right at league average or well below league average. He's currently sitting with a 5.4 ERA and a 1.37 whip through 20 starts. His FIP is 4.8, so it's not like he's been incredibly unlucky. Has the lowest strikeout to walk rate of his career right now at 2.44, which is a solid 0.4 below even his career worst year in 2021. So there are a lot of questions about whether or not Zac Gallen is... I mean, again, he's 29, so you don't want to say somebody is washed at 20. Although he's about to turn 30, he'll turn 30 in a couple weeks. But I don't know. Like, is that a pitcher right now? I mean, given what he's done this year, and even if you want to combine this year with what he did last year, is that someone that is going to get much of a run in your rotation and provide much value for you? Like, what are you going to trade for a guy like that? Is that guy, and especially when you start to think about, Fried and you have like with Fried and Rodon at the top, you're hoping, you have Luis Heel, that is going to be back soon. You start to think about what a rotation would look like in the postseason, and is there a role for him there? And I would say, like, Rodon, there probably is, but I mean, obviously, because Schmidt's not coming back, maybe, I'm not sure, quite frankly, what they're going to do with Yarbrough, or whether or not he's going to go right. Obviously, I feel like he's more likely to go back in the rotation now that Schmidt's gone down than I did before, but obviously they still only have one lefty in the pen. But you've got Fried, you've got Rodon, and then you've got Heel in this hypothetical scenario, so you're probably looking at one more guy. The question is going to be, is Zac Gallen, what you have right now, how big of an upgrade is he over Will Warren? How big of an upgrade is he over potentially, Ryan Yarbrough? Or, I don't think the Yankees are going to be in a spot where they're going to want to start Schlittler or Stroman in a playoff spot type of a thing. But so that's the question. And right now Warren has been all over the place. So I kind of get why you're like, yeah, you don't really, that's an upgradable spot for them. Is Zac Gallen that guy? Depends. The other name from a starter perspective that has been attached to the Yankees is the guy that's been attached to the Yankees from the very beginning. And that is Sandy Alcantara. And this is another case of, do you think that he's got it still? And I think, to me, Alcantara is a guy that I want to be careful how I phrase this, because this has been a bad year. But there's also a guy just coming off. This is his first year coming back off of Tommy John. And it's not inconceivable that it's going to take a little bit. He's throwing a lot of innings for a guy. I mean, he's almost up to 100 innings already. He's a lot of innings for a guy in his first year back from Tommy John. But he's been really, really bad this year. Everything except his fastball, which his fastball velocity is still very good, which is encouraging to see. And almost, I mean, from a velocity standpoint, it's pretty close to where it was before surgery. So that part is really exciting. But if you take a look at what his numbers, have been throughout his career, I think particularly once he started to really hit a stride in that 2021 through 2023 stretch, he's a far cry from that. And this year he is getting just hammered in every aspect. And you start to wonder whether or not this is a guy that won the Cy Young in 2022, finished top 10 in the MVP race that year, and really, if you want to look at it, has really been pretty solid since being called up, and particularly since the pandemic. Like, if you look at that stretch from 2020 through 2022, that 3-year run that he had, he was able to accumulate 13 wins above replacement in 72 starts. He had a 2.74 ERA with a 3.24 FIP, a 1.04 WHIP. I mean, like he was doing some really, really good stuff there. All 3 years above 8 strikeouts per 9 inning. 2 of those 3 years above 4 strikeout to walk ratio. And obviously he wasn't quite as good in 2023, although he was fine. He was basically a 4 ERA pitcher. And obviously had the Tommy John, missed 2024, and has just been one of the worst pitchers in baseball so far this year. So the question is going to be, is this somebody that you think is going to make a big difference for you this year? And I don't know. And I think this is kind of the issue that the Yankees are facing with this starters market. Now, there is some team control left on Alcantara's deal. He's got 2 more years left effectively. He's under contract for 2026 and has a club option for 2027. So he is not. So if, unlike Gallen, who's heading to the free agent market this offseason, Alcantara is somebody that is going to be probably looked at as a multi-year element. And if you want to look at it in that case, as some pitching depth for the longer term, I do think that makes sense. But you're kind of looking at a pitcher that is, again, not necessarily an upgrade for you right now. Now, if you want to kind of, look at something that gets you a little bit more excited, he has been a little better lately. In the last, if you want to isolate his last, his last 7 starts, the problem is he had a good stretch I should say this, because he hasn't been better lately. I'm going to correct myself. He was. He had that stretch of those first four starts in June where he was really, really good, getting you 23 innings with a 2.74 ERA. Was looking really good. 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 innings, no runs, 5 innings, 2 runs, 6 innings, 3 runs. And then he's been hit around in those last 3 starts. He gave up 7 earned runs in 6 innings against the Diamondbacks on the 28th of June. July 4th, 5 runs in 6 innings against Milwaukee. And then on July 9th, 6 runs in 5 innings against Cincinnati. So, it has not gotten a lot better since then. So, again, this is another case of somebody that I look at and I go, what's the price? And I think that's the same kind of case with Gallen, too, of what's the price? I'm not giving up a lot. In my mind, I don't think it would be fair to give up a ton. We're not talking about the Spencer Jones, the Schlitlers, some of the other names that have kind of been thrown around, for the Yankees, just to, I know the name JC Escarra's come up a bit. Maybe that's a guy you throw out there because you have so many catchers and, you want to get Ben Rice more play behind the plate type of a thing. But even that, like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm not excited. Mitch Keller is a name that has come up as well. He's somebody that I think would be a more shrewd signing a more shrewd trade than I think people would imagine, just because he doesn't have a ton of name value, just because he's been kind of stuck in Pittsburgh, and obviously he's stuck in Pittsburgh behind Paul Skeens. But Mitch Keller is actually, he had a real tough 2024 season. And I think that kind of got people off of the radar a little bit. But I liked what he did in 2023. Obviously, he made his all-star year. Same thing even with 2022 season. Last year wasn't horrible. Again, a little over 4. Again, we're understanding what we're getting here. But it's having a pretty solid start so far this season through 20 starts. Again, just like Zac Gallen here. 3.48 ERA, 3.33 FIP. 3.41 strikeout to walk. Again, not a heavy strikeout guy. Has shown more strikeout potential in these last couple of years than he has so far this year. He's down to 7 Ks per 9. But, is somebody that I think has legitimate, rotation improvement for you. Like, you talk about a guy like right now with how they are pitching this year. Do I think Mitch Keller is an improvement over a Will Warren, over a guy like Schlittler, over anybody that could pull up from AAA? Yes, I do actually think that. And I think he would be a really nice addition, again, depending on what Pittsburgh wants from him. The only other name that I've heard from a starter standpoint that's been realistic, I mean, everybody throws out some names. Like, I don't think Chris Sale's getting traded. I don't think some stuff like that. But would be Edward Cabrera, who is somebody I'm really intrigued by. I don't know what his price is going to be, and I fear that I don't necessarily think he's going to get traded this year. I gotta see what his contract situation is right now, because I feel like the Marlins still have some. I feel like the Marlins still have 2 or 3 years. They have 3 more years of control on him after this year. He's going into his ARB 2, so he's got a few more years here left of team control. So there's not really a huge sense of urgency if you're the Marlins to move on from Edward Cabrera right now. But this is somebody that has some really intriguing stuff. And, he's having his best season since that 2022 year to date. I would argue the peripherals probably look better this year than any other year in his career. He's got the lowest FIP of his career, second lowest ERA behind that 2022 season. This is a guy that is basically been a 10 strikeout per 9 guy over the course of his career. Still walks too many batters, and that's something that's going to have. It's been an issue throughout his career. I mean, he has a 4.7 career walks per 9. And I think that part is really, really frustrating. Although, again, he's well ahead of his pace with a career best 3.3 in that category so far this year. He is somebody that really intrigues me. He relies a lot more on his off speed than his fastball. Like, he is a changeup curve type pitcher, works in his sinker slider, and then uses his four-seamer as kind of like his fifth pitch. But he's still on some levels a sinker slider guy. And we talk about guys that Matt Blake want to work with. Even though those are his third and fourth most used pitches in 2025, he is pretty equal in what he is used. He is, and I think maybe that's the one difference you've seen from him this year is he's gone away from his four-seamer and has really upped his sinker and slider. And I think if you want to start talking about how much he wants to use those pitches more, and if he's going to continue that trend this year, I would be very, very encouraged by what you would be able to do with Matt Blake. Although, again, I don't really feel like he's quite going to get there yet. So those are the starting pitchers the Yankees can look at here. This is getting a little bit long for this show, so I probably will cut it off here and we'll talk about, because there's really only a couple hitters that we were going to discuss on Friday's show, so I'll mix in the bullpen arms because I think that's going to be a really interesting component as well. I don't think the Yankees are going to get too crazy in the hitter front unless it's a third baseman, and we'll talk about what the options are there, the prize that we're all looking at, and some of the fallback options, and we'll also work in some of the bullpen, because I think that's really going to be where they're going to add pieces. I'm not necessarily sure they're going to trade for anybody we just talked about on this show today. I would be shocked if they don't trade for somebody that we talk about on tomorrow's show. So we'll get into a little bit more depth on that end, and then we will get back to baseball as the Yankees finally return to the field on Friday, although they will still be in the home of the All-Star Game, Atlanta. So please let me know who you think the Yankees should go after. But for this show in particular, let me know, do you want them to go after a starter? If so, which starter? What's too much to give up? Or should the Yankees put all of their eggs in the bullpen and third base bucket? We'll talk about all that tomorrow.